Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk to Experts Tuesday. My name is Sue Macaluso, and I am the Senior Community Specialist here at Qlik. I've been with Qlik for almost 2 years now. Today, we are going to talk about Qlik Replicate. And before we begin, I'm going to turn the call over to Jamie Gregory, who will go over some ground rules, some guidelines for our call. She will also introduce the other experts that are here with us. And with that, I will turn it over to Jamie.
Thank you, Sue. Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's Talk to Experts Tuesday. This series allows us here at Qlik to connect with all of you. So each session, as you maybe know by now, we have a different topic with subject matter experts on the call. We will use this time to field your questions, share resources, and hopefully demonstrate a few things within the product. If you're new to this session, everyone is muted, so please make sure you use the Q&A panel below to ask your questions. We typically won't be responding back within the panel, as we're going to try to get to everyone's questions live today. If we don't get to your question or it's something that may take some time to research, it will be posted in the Qlik community along with the recording, and I'll show you where that is a little bit later today. So please keep in mind that even though some of the experts we have on the call are within Qlik support, we will not be able to answer any specific questions regarding an open case. And we do just ask that you keep the questions related to the topic at hand. So as Sue said, today's topic is Qlik Replicate. So Qlik Replicate is a high-performance data replication tool that offers optimized data ingestion from a broad array of data sources and platforms, as well as seamless integration with all major data analytics platforms. Replicate supports bulk replication as well as real-time incremental replication using change data capture, or CDC. The unique zero-footprint architecture eliminates unnecessary overhead on your mission-critical systems and facilitates zero downtime data migrations and database upgrades. So let us know what kind of questions you have on Qlik Replicate. Are you a current user with a technical question? Are you new to Qlik Replicate and looking for more information or maybe a quick demo? Let us know what kind of questions you have using the Q&A panel below. So while we wait for all of you to get your questions in, I would like to take this time to introduce our experts for the day. So today I have Dana Baldwin, Customer Support Engineer, Jeff Schwartz, Team Lead of Technical Support, Jeff Cole, Data Integration Expert, and Ola Mayer, Director of Product Management. So Dana, will you take this time to go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I've been with Attunity for about 5 years, and I work from my home office in Arizona.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Jeff Schwartz. This is going to be interesting too, Jeff.
Yes, good morning. I've been working with Attunity for, and Qlik for quite a number of years. Let's see, probably 20 or more.
Oh, wow.
And let's see, so I've had some usage with a lot with Replicate, and especially with Replicate on Linux.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And Jeff Cole?
Jeff Cole, I work in the subject matter experts group based here in Clearwater, Florida. And I've been with Attunity Qlik for about 15.5 years. And I was a customer before that for about 5 years. So quite a bit of Replicate knowledge and our previous products.
Awesome. That's amazing. You guys have been with the company a long time. That's so great to hear. And not least, let's go with Ola.
Hello, everybody. I'm a product management for Attunity Replicate, Qlik Replicate, and enterprise manager. I've been with Attunity Qlik for over 8.5 years already, and I'm based in Boston.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Thank you, guys. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump right into the questions. So the first question that we have coming in is, why is the Users tab not showing up under the server view in my Linux environment?
Okay, I'll handle that. It's because in Linux Replicate, there is only one user in the default mode, the admin user, who has full access to everything. If you want to be able to have roles for users, you would have to use the Windows UI with the Linux replicate server.
Okay, so that's a difference between Windows and Linux.
Right. If you want, I can show that.
Yeah,
Is that-
if you can.
All right. So let's see. Where is share screen?
There's a green button at the bottom of the
Yeah,
menu.
I found the share
Okay.
screen. Now I just want to see. Oh, I'll just share the whole screen. That's okay.
Yep.
Share. And then if we look on, so here's the server mode on Linux replicate, and you can see that there are fewer tabs than on the Windows side, the user permissions. And also note that I'm running different versions of replicate in Linux and Unix, so Linux and Windows. So there are external utilities is something that's in 6.6, but the user version, so you can, work with the Active Directory and set up individual users or groups that are in your Active Directory to give access and change the roles. So that's, just the way it works.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jeff. All right. And another question coming in, how do I collect the process dumps for Qlik replicate?
I can take that one.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Cool.
So let me share my screen. Okay, so we did a presentation in-house a couple weeks back, and then we uploaded it to the Qlik community page.
Perfect.
And basically, it's a presentation, but it's a PowerPoint also. And in the PowerPoint, it just goes through and gives you instructions on what you have to set up inside of Replicate, what you have to set up at the operating system level, both for Windows and for a Linux environment, to be able to capture that debug information. It basically just goes through and shows you all the stuff that's needed by support to be able to debug a dump situation where a process is just ending unexpectedly. So if you just review that PowerPoint, that presentation, it's got some pretty good information about things that support's going to be looking for to be able to help fix the issue.
Perfect. And that's an article, right? So if they go to community.qlik.com and then search.
Right. It's in the support knowledge base, and it's called Collecting Replicate Process Dumps.
Okay, perfect. So you can just search for that, and you should be able to pull up that article pretty quickly. Just a quick note on searching, everything is searchable within Google as well. So you guys can always just open up Google and search for collecting replicate process dumps or replicate process dumps, something like that. And it should pull up the article as well. So it's great. Thank you, Jeff. All right. Next question we have, how can Qlik replicate access SAP ECC HANA systems via SAP Extractors?
Jeff, do you want to answer this, or do you want me to go?
So basically on the SAP HANA source, we've been moving more toward using the underlying database directly. It's a much better performance as far as pulling changes out of SAP HANA.
Jeff, the question is about Extractors. So let me answer that. We just added support of SAP Extractors to our replicate capabilities in this release. It's a very new functionality. Basically, we are just beta testing it. So what we basically utilizing the extractor as a connector to SAP. So the same way that you are used to utilizing extractors to capture data from SAP and move it into BW, we're just replacing the endpoint on the other side. So instead, so we all the same information, the same setup that you're using today to capture data from Extractors, that on the back end we are plugging in Replicate, and from there we take it into to the destination of your choice, whatever is supported by Replicate.
Okay, perfect. I hope that answers the question. If there's anything else, more specific that that person would like to hear, just let us know, okay? Thank you, guys. All right, and remember, everybody, use the Q&A panel below to get your questions in. Let's see, what's the next question? Can you please recommend on how to set up a change control management in production and the options to migrate several tasks lower to higher environments?
Can you read the question again?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you please recommend how to set up a change control management in production and the options to migrate several tasks lower to higher environments?
I can take that one
Okay.
a little bit. So if you're trying to move, and we're talking about basically a replicate task and trying to move it between environments, either moving it up to production or moving it into a QA environment or maybe down to dev. Typically, you would set up the connections ahead of time on all the environments. So the connection, and we call them endpoints, it's basically the connection string information. You can then take advantage of Enterprise Manager's API solution to be able to export that information from one environment, either change the endpoint connection strings or remove them completely with as long as they're the same name, we'll use them in the new environment, and then import those using the API set to the new environment. You can also, when you extract that, it's in a JSON format that you can check into source control so that you can track that.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Jeff. All right. So let's see. Next question. So we have experienced slowness when using Upsert mode. What alternative, if any, is available to increase speed while keeping features that Upsert provide, such as the ability to do an insert when an update transaction arrives and there is no record in the target?
Right, so this is Jeff. I'll take that one again. So typically we're in batch apply mode, and you've set the Upsert mode. It's going to, like if an update comes in, we're going to issue a delete, then an insert. So basically replace the update with a delete insert. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for tables that have lob information in them. Most of the time we suggest splitting your lob tables that have lobs in them, into a separate task that you know are going to be slower to apply, so it doesn't impact the bulk of your tables going through. If you're in a database that likes big transactions like Snowflake or some of the other web-based apps, then you want to be able to build large batches. So some of that tuning is around setting the batch size so that you're doing large amounts of changes at the same time. But every situation is a little bit different. So typically you'd want to open a case for that and get somebody from support involved to see if there's something else impacting your environment.
Perfect. All right. So the next question is there a platform where we can ask more general questions, e.g. using Web Connector to connect to multiple workbooks on the same SharePoint site? Workbooks are in different folders, or oh, this is a Qlik Sense question, so never mind. This is a Qlik Replicate session, so let's try to keep it to the task at hand. I don't have any Qlik Sense experts on at this time, but I will say that we are going to have another Qlik Sense session coming in November. I think it's November 20th. whatever, I think like right before Thanksgiving, the Tuesday. So we are having a Qlik Send session on that day. So we will, it's, typically you can use community though to ask questions in the meantime, or you could create a case with support. So we will be having another session for Qlik Sense at a later time. All right, so let's see, another question. Is there any way where we can extract the record counts of a table or tables from source and target, columns matching of the source tables and target tables, and the values in each column between source and target? All of these can be extracted from Replicate. Any tables that capture this information, my source is SAP HANA and targets are Azure Managed Instance and Azure Synapse.
So I can take this one a little bit. So Replicate doesn't store information about the actual record counts that are in the source and target. We only keep track of data that flows through Replicate. And you can use like Enterprise Manager to track those statistics. If you're looking for something that's more a comparison between the source and the target, although Replicate doesn't support that type of a tool set, there are lots of tools out there that allows you to compare two different databases. Most of our customers will do select record counts or a hash value of the rows and compare that information to find out if their data is in sync. But typically there's only the analytics database that's built into Enterprise Manager. Like I said, it's only for data that has actually flowed through Replicate.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. And so another question that just came in as well, will there be a similar session for Compose for data warehouses? We don't currently have anything on the schedule for that, but if there is a demand for it and you guys would like to see that, of course, we can get that on the schedule. We are doing planning for 2021, so I will make sure that gets added. All right, so next question. How does Replicate send updates, deletes from relational database to file targets, for example, Oracle to S3? Does it send any indicator in the file to mention it as updates, deletes?
I'll take that one again. So in change tables, there's quite a few different header columns that identify the user that made the change, as long as the source database provides that, the transaction ID, the time the change happened, the operation, is this an insert, update, delete, or maybe it's the before image for the update. So that header information on a change table, which the change tables can be a file target, then you'll get that information and then you'll be able to act upon that.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers the question. If you guys have any questions, again, make sure you're using the Q&A panel below to get your questions in so we can, you guys have our experts on your call. So let's ask them some good questions. We're doing a great job so far though, I think. All right. So the next question, with the November technical preview, are there any new endpoints being added?
I'll take this one. So yes, we added support for a Azure Databricks Delta as a data warehouse target. And we also added a Azure MySQL as a source to our support matrix as a new endpoint.
Perfect. Great. Going along with the technical preview, are there going to be any changes? Are there going to be any changes in what drivers, database version, and clients that are supported?
So we publish naturally with every release, we certify the latest drivers, and those are posted in the documentations as prerequisites.
Okay, perfect. And let's see, next question. Can data be replicated into AWS S3 in the form of Parquet files?
Today we don't support. Today we support landing data in CSV or sequence formats. Don't support direct replication into Parquet format.
Okay. If clients have a feature request that they would like to make, what is the best way to make their voice heard?
So there is the ideation. Sorry, Qlik community is an amazing platform for A, submitting general questions, but B, also submitting ideas and requests for new features. If you want, I can share my screen with you to show you
Sure.
the location. Share the screen. So once you're in community, in Qlik community, the product insight and ideas, you will select, if you want to submit a new idea, you will select this option. You can review, first of all, what other your peers are already submitted, what other requests they're in line already existing. So for example, you can just filter on replicate or any specific, like let's say just filter based on replicate engine specific questions. And then when you are ready, you can submit. If you don't see something similar already existing in this on these pages, you can submit your new requests. The PM team is reviewing those requests on bi-weekly basis. Some of them are rejected, most of them are considered valid, but then we will open them for inputs from other customers. And every time we do our planning for future releases, this is one of the sources that we use for input for our roadmap.
Perfect.
Just to add to that, though, you need to be a customer or a partner to actually submit an idea. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to be logged in to use the ideas
And
board.
logged in.
But yeah, absolutely. This is a great place to make your voice heard. Like Ola was saying, you can search, and then if you don't find it, you can enter in your own idea. You can comment on other people's ideas, and you can upvote other people's ideas as well. So we definitely recommend, checking out the ideas board if you already haven't, just to see what kind of requests are already out there. And if there is anything that piques your interest, make sure you upvote that. All right, thank you. So next question, what are the factors considered while coming up with the hardware sizing for a replicate server?
Jeff, I think
Or
that
if you
would
wanted
be.
to, Ola?
I'll take
Yeah.
that one, I guess. So basically, if you're trying to figure out the hardware requirements, obviously a lot of it comes down to the volume that you're doing. The number of full loads that you're going to be running in parallel is a big impact to the size of the server. If you're going to a file target, you may want to make sure you have the right amount of disk space available. If your SLAs are very small and tight, you may have to make sure you have enough memory, because most of the time replicate will process in memory, and there's some tuning we can do to make sure it uses a lot of the available memory that you have on your box. So there's quite a few things that go into planning that. The user's guide has like a general, small, medium, large, extra large type setup that works pretty well for most implementations.
Do you guys have consultants that clients can work with to figure out what size environment?
Right. Typically, that's determined during a POC or proof of concept setup, where we get a good handle on what production would look like, and then the PS group can help with the sizing of the hardware.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, just to add on, they would do an architectural review, and they would be talking about sizing and that sort of stuff. Another factor that goes into sizing is in the tables that you're replicating, how many lob columns are there, and if you can determine what the maximum size of a entry or data in the lobs will be, that would also go a long ways to determining, the sizing of the replicate server.
Great. Perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, let's see. Next question. I have a log stream set up that pulls from SQL Server. It is currently 197 hours behind. I have checked the memory and disk on the Qlik server and see no issues. There is 50% RAM left and no disk queuing. Is there any tuning that needs to be done on the Qlik side? It has been processing 124 million basically commands for a week plus.
I can take that. When we're tuning and reading from SQL Server, there's some things that can adversely impact latency. Database maintenance, doing a reindex on the database causes a huge amount of transaction logs that Replicate has to parse through to be able to get to the data it wants. One thing you can do is if you're using native backups and you can give direct access to the logs, then you can configure the Replicate endpoint to do what we call direct read of the files instead of going through the normal API route. So if it is database maintenance causing it, that's one kind of option. Another best practice, if you can't do direct read, is to stop and resume the task after your database maintenance is done. And this has to do with the way that transactions are stored in the transaction log. And things that happen during a reindex that cause a latency issue.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. All right, so remember everybody to use the Q&A panel below to get your questions in. Let's see, next question. Are there any best practice documents or tips on transmitting data fast to the target sources? Is there anyone that can help with this question, or is it a little bit outside of the scope?
It needs more context, that type of question. So it depends on what the target is. If the target is, in AWS or in a cloud base, then you want to make sure that you take advantage of that cloud services. They have different names for it, but basically you want a dedicated connection to that target. If it's on site, maybe make sure it's in the same data center. So we really need a little bit more context for a question like that.
Perfect. That happens. I think that's a good point to just kind of raise in general when, posting to the community or creating a case with support or anything like that, more is always better.
Right.
We do have a blog out there about creating cases, and it kind of goes into depth about that stuff about, make sure you're not using some of these cliche statements and just like it doesn't work, or how do I make it go faster, like, or it's slower now. So, we need context is, needed for those kinds of questions. So yeah, absolutely. If that person, wants to provide a little bit more context, we can probably get you a more clearer defined answer. For now, we'll just go to the next question. So, but thank you, Jeff.
I'm sorry, can
Go ahead.
Also in the community, there are different data integration forums, information forums. For example, in each forum has a place for Q&A and also for documentation. So for this type of general questions, let's say, for example, you want to see how to improve data load to Snowflake. I would recommend first logging into the forum, going into the documentation section and just search for specific keyword and see if those documents already exist or not.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Great. Thank you, Ola. That's great advice. All right. So our next question, is it recommended to have the data directory outside of the product installation directory? And if it should be on another drive, say product is installed on C drive and data folder on D drive?
Sure, I can handle that one, Jamie.
Okay.
Usually you would want to do that because by default, everything is put on the C drive, your system drive. And so you would want to have the data folder somewhere else, because if something runs away, you wouldn't want to fill up your system folder. The other thing in Replicate, there are resource controls, and one of which is a disk resource control on the data, or the directory that, the drive that contains the data directory. So that way you can prevent the system from filling up the data drive. But yeah, typically, you know, on a production system, you would want the data folder on another drive than where you install the main product.
Perfect. Yep, that makes sense.
One additional note on that is kind of if you're using Logstream, it's a good practice to have Logstream, the directory that Logstream is using, on a different drive than the data drive, so that they're not competing with each other. So just keep that in mind also.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys. All right. So next question, for the November technical preview, is there going to be any improvements to Google BigQuery?
So yes, there is one of the performance improvements for Google BigQuery. We're utilizing for batch optimized apply. We introduced a new version, a new option. Instead of just using Upsert operations, you have an option now to select merge operation. Some estimates in the lab show that can improve the performance 3x faster than our current methodology.
Perfect. That's great. All right. Next question. We have a business resiliency requirement to provide where there can be no more than a 10-minute impact on CDC replication. We have Qlik Replicate running on GCP. What is the recommended best practice for providing HA in this environment? Active to active would be desirable.
So I could take this a little bit. We don't, I don't think we have any best practices per se for running on a web-based platform, either the Google Cloud or the AWS. Typically, if we're going into a relational database, there's settings you can turn on in Replicate to store the context of where we're leaving off in the target database, so that you can recover quickly if you switch to another server. We don't support an active-active type environment, so it would have to be somewhat manual or automated. If you automate the starting of the task, you'd have to stop the task on one server and then start it up on the other server. But there's lots of other things that go into that, by making sure that the servers, as far as the configuration, are in sync and things like that. But that's something best that would have to go through like the RPS group to help you figure out the best practice for that.
Gotcha. All right. So let's remember, use the Q&A panel below. I do just want to share my screen really quickly and show you guys a couple things, kind of unrelated, I guess. Related, but unrelated. Let's see. Let me pull over my browser for you guys. So here is the Qlik community, and I do, like I said, just want to point out a couple things. Here under support programs, we have our Talk to Experts Tuesday section. So this is where the recording is going to be posted along with the transcript of the recording, and then it'll also link to the FAQ. So the FAQ gets put into an article, and that would be under the support knowledge base here. But you can see the current events that are coming or upcoming events, and then under past events is where you will find the recordings and the transcripts. And once again, too, I do want to point out the support updates blog, just because we do post quite a bit in this updates blog. We pretty much have daily posts, and it can be general support things like I told you guys about that blog about creating a case and, kind of best practices for creating a case. And then also If there's any issues with any systems or anything like that, some known issues that come about that we want to try to communicate with everybody, we do post about that in the blog here. So if you're not subscribed, I do recommend subscribing to the blog. You'll get email notifications. Most people just set up a rule to kind of tuck them away, and that's completely fine. But I do recommend, checking this out at least if you haven't already, or just kind of going through whenever you have a chance and think about it and just look at some of the blogs and the content that we have out there. All right. So the recording will be posted along with the FAQ. It usually takes just a couple of days, so probably by Thursday, we'll have everything up. So if you missed the session or anything like that, or you missed the answer to your question, you can take a look at those resources once they're available. All right, so next question. Is it recommended that replicate server should be installed closer to source system or closer to target for better performance? For example, my source ERP is in Europe region and target is cloud platform in the US region.
I can take that. Usually it's better to have replicate in closer to the source because of if it's a database, we're reading something like a transaction log or a redo log, something like that. So it makes sense to have it there. Ola, I have a question for you on this. Are we still using the old style where we had two different types, two replicate servers, and doing the transfer between them?
About file channel?
File channel, yes. Because what file channel is, it's another kind of architecture where you have what's called a local and a remote replicate server, and then you can have one server in each environment. And what happens is that the data is transferred very quickly and in an optimized form between the two replicate servers in an internal format. And so you can do that.
Can you repeat the question that just the question that
was asked?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it recommended that replicate server should be installed closer to the source system or closer to target for better performance? For example, my source ERP is in the European region and target is cloud platform in US region.
Yeah, so Jeff is correct. Usually our recommendations is to install replicate server as close as possible to the source because especially in the cases when there is lots of filtering, like if you don't want to transfer all the data, you can do filtering and transference locally and then use the network to push the rest of the data over. Technology that Jeff mentioned, the file channel technology, is we are supporting that. It's been supported for a long time. It's a little bit outdated technology. I think the solution for data transfers and compression over the network that's available today in the market are by far significantly better. So we do recommend kind of close installation next to the source and then utilizing some of the high-speed technologies available today in the market.
So a lot of that depends on their latency requirements.
Yeah.
So if they didn't have tough latency requirements, then you may not need a remote replicate server. But if the latency requirements are small or it's a huge amount of data, then you may have to install replicate on both ends.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, everyone. All right, so let's see. Next question. Well, the question is, what are the new features for the November technical preview? But I'm just wondering, Ola, if you can show where they can find the technical preview, maybe talk a little bit about it, because I believe Attunity used to call the technical preview something else, and maybe just talk a little bit about that, please.
So let me share my screen. And So do you see my screen? I'm going back to the community. So in the Unity days, we used to either call it beta or early access program or any of the other standard naming in the industry. Once we joined Qlik, we started to utilize their software delivery platform, and one of those was technical preview. As was mentioned before, the technical previews, like ideations, are open only to existing Qlik customers that have an account in support portal. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm myself still learning. So every time we have a major release, I try, like, if it makes sense, we are participating in the technical preview product, basically enabling our existing customers and internal users to access software 3 to 4 weeks before the solution becomes GA. So it's available right now. So if you come to the community, you go into product inside and ideas, you select the technical preview page, and here you can basically filter. Like in our case, we'll be focusing on replicate. You can filter specific product that you want to preview at the time. And so here you can see here, Katie posted our technical preview a few days ago at the beginning of this week. So if you come in here, you have links to the download and to the documentation. It's also kind of provide here all the information, all the information you need before you start working with the product.
Perfect. That's great. And I just have another question. Do you know about, time frame of when the November release will be available? Is it, I know you can't give specific dates or anything like that typically, but is it like the later half of the month or the beginning half of the month?
It's actually, the date is already set, and I don't think
perfect.
it's coming, so it's November 10.
Oh, great. Perfect. So that's exciting. All right. Thank you, Ola. All right. So another question, how can Replicate ingest lob data type columns?
I can handle that. I mean, it really depends upon what the source is, but in general, Replicate does ingest and deal with lob data types. You look in the Replicate user guide to see what it actually does with the specific source endpoint that you do have, or the database type that you are reading it from. It will mention, I mean, there are some limitations depending upon what the database is. And certainly the other thing you have to be aware of is where are you replicating the data to, because that endpoint type or database will have its own, or potentially have its own limitations that you have to be aware of. And, Replicate will deal with both, but it may not do what you want it to do.
Great. So for that person, if there's a specific source that you're talking about, just let us know and we can maybe
source and target, please.
Source and target, perfect. Yep, and we can try to be a little bit more specific on that. All right, great. I had another question. You guys have mentioned a few times about the guide for Qlik Replicate. Can someone show where they can find that, or just talk about how to access that guide?
I can do that. Give me a second. So in general, sorry, give me a second. I'm gonna log in. Qlik.com. So let me share my screen. Okay. So for in general, Qlik has a website called help.qlik.com where you can find documentation for all the products for all the existing products with all the GA versions. This is an example of a web page for replicate documentation. One difference I would like to bring out to your attention, that starting until now, until the April version, all our documentation was in PDF format. Starting the November version, we're actually going to be releasing our documentation in HTML format, and customers that are joining beta can have a preview of this HTML format documentation on the beta. Like, you have a link in the preview website to this documentation, and you will be able, from this version and on, we'll have the option of seeing the documentation either in HTML, and if you still want to download PDF, it's available at the bottom of the list.
Perfect. Great, thank you. All right, so can the replicate server service and replicate UI service be run by the same user on Windows Server? Does it need to have admin role?
So this is Jeff. So they can be run on the same server. They don't necessarily have to be an admin role, but they have to have the ability to edit files because the console and the server are both going to be writing task logs, other logging information, updating status files, and things like that. So it needs quite a bit of permissions on the local server.
Okay.
It may also be interacting with like a domain manager to authenticate users. So it needs quite a bit of security.
And then I'd like to add that on Linux, there is no separate replicate UI service. It is just one daemon, so to speak. Now, you can run Linux replicate server service with a Windows UI, and then you'd still have what Jeff Cole said. But on Linux, part of the installation is there is a quote-unquote Attunity user. Does not need to be root. You specify what that user is, and as part of the installation process, which has to be run through root or sudo or something like that, is it changes the ownership and the protections on all the files that are created, so that the replicate user account has access to those files. So the requirements about being able to write the log files and the status files and everything else is will be upheld.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, guys. All right. So again, a reminder, make sure you're using the Q&A panel. I think this is going to be the last call for questions. So if you have any questions, let's get them in. So next question, are there any best practice recommendations while replicating data from SAP HANA to AWS S3?
So like we talked about before on cloud connections, make sure you're using like an AWS, make sure you're using like Direct Connect so that you have a good solid connection to the cloud process.
All right, cool. All right. Does anyone have anything? Are there any major support issues or anything that you guys want to discuss really quickly? Anything that's come up that you've seen a lot of, or no? Okay, no problem. I think that's it for everything today. So this was an amazing session, everyone. We answered, I think, almost 25 questions. So that's really good for, about 15 minutes. That's amazing. So thank you, Jeff, Ola, and Dana for joining me today. And thank you to all of our users that were able to join and get your questions answered. I hope that everyone found this session beneficial. And like I said, we have more planned on the horizon for 2021, so stay tuned for all that. We'll make sure we get to all of our QDI products during that time. And thank you guys, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.